Thank you very much, David. It's really great to be here. It's also tough to be here in this slot, following Brian Pirtle and then following David Warsh channeled through Tim. That's a bit daunting. Many of you, at least those of you who are my age, will know who Jerry Lee Lewis is, the great rock and roller. And Jerry Lee Lewis is called the killer in the business because if he's on a bill, no one will play after him. He has to play last. You know, after you've stood on the bench, after you've gotten on top of the piano and played back down on the keyboard, nobody wants to get on stage. I feel a little bit like that today. But let me channel David Byrne and see if we can burn down the house ourselves, okay? I realized personally the trouble we have as liberal educators when my oldest son, Thomas, who is now 25, was a junior in high school. When Thomas was in the 8th grade, he was diagnosed with cancer. I was teaching at Grinnell College at the time, and we sold our house in Grinnell and moved to Des Moines to be near his medical care. We put him in an excellent private high school in Des Moines. Frankly, we didn't know if he would graduate from high school because we didn't know if he would live that long, but we wanted him to have a great education. And so we put him in a private high school. And I had some questions. I liked this high school because a couple of the best students that I had taught at Grinnell were graduates of this high school, but I also knew that very few students from the high school came to Grinnell. And so I learned more about that. I learned a little bit about why they were discouraged from doing that. Actually, I learned by their guidance counselor. And so by the time Thomas was a junior in high school, I surreptitiously started handing out my card, my calling card, to the kids that he took class with. He was in all the advanced AP classes. He's a National Merit Scholar. He's a great guy and a brilliant young man. And I thought maybe I can start a dialogue with some of these young people about coming to Grinnell. It would be great to have some of them at Grinnell. And I began talking to them, and I realized they and their parents had absolutely no idea of what a liberal education was. Not only did they not know about Grinnell, they didn't know about liberal education. For the kids in this cohort, these very bright kids in this private high school, their dream was to become a National Merit Scholar because they got to go to Iowa State University for free. It was tuition free if you were a National Merit Scholar. So they would ask me, why would I want to go to Grinnell if I could go to Iowa State for free? And this is when I realized the magnitude of the problem we faced. So my last 2 years at Grinnell, from 2005 to 2007, I moved into the dean's office as an associate dean, and I had responsibility for first-year studies. So I got the students in the first hour after we severed them from their parents, the first-year students. We had a very elaborate ritual with lunch, and as they came out of lunch, we put a wedge between the parents and the students, and we got the students off into a lecture hall by themselves, and the parents who asked if they could come in here were told no, and they went back and stood around their cars for a little while until they decided they should get in and drive away. And so I developed an instrument with our director of institutional research with 4 questions. When did you first learn about liberal education? Not when, and the question said, not when did you learn about Grinnell College, but when did you learn about liberal education? From whom did you learn about liberal education? How would you define liberal education? And how do you think you'll be different because you came to college at Grinnell? And I'm telling you, the answers were awful. They would dispirit you. These are wonderful students, average SAT score of 1,400, from great high schools, drawn to Grinnell for we thought the right reasons. No idea, but the best answer I got to what is liberal education is, it's the smorgasbord of American higher education. So it was kind of like a diner in a little Wisconsin town. So this is when I really realized the magnitude of the problem we faced, how little our students understood what it was that we were trying to give them when they came to us. And so I ask you, think about the question. Wherever it is that you work, whatever higher education institution you're in, where do your students learn what liberal education is? They might take a 19th century British literature class and they would read Matthew Arnold's Culture and Anarchy and Bishop Cardinal Newman's The Idea of a University. Maybe. Not so many students take 19th century British lit anymore. They might take a 300-level seminar in Latin or in the classics, and they would read Seneca's 88th letter on liberal education, maybe, but not many of your students are going to get to a 300-level class in the classics. And so where do your students learn what liberal education is? How does that happen for your students? I want to argue with you that the place that it should happen is in academic advising. Academic advising is the place where a student should learn what liberal education is. Many people in the room think that liberal education that academic advising is an activity in which you've got a little checklist and you say 4 in a foreign language, 3 in the humanities, 2 in social studies, 1 lab science, bingo, you got a liberal education. And that's it. You think if the students have the experience, they'll figure it out for themselves, they'll make the connections, and that's a liberal education. I want to argue with you that that's a bad idea. If you really care about liberal education, if you really want your students to experience this, what you want to do is to engage them in a discussion about the project that you are undertaking with them. That is, you want to talk to them about the liberal education that they will build. You don't want to do bingo card advising with them. So let me try to explain to you a little bit what it is I have in mind and what it is that I mean. It's a privilege in a sense to be here today to give this talk because one of the people who has been instrumental in helping me shape my own ideas about advising is a woman named Marty Hemwall who worked here at Lawrence for many years. She and a co-author, Kent Trachty, have done some really phenomenal writing on advising, and it helped shape my own thinking. So it's really great to be able to come back and to honor and recognize Marty here. So in this model of liberal education, in this model of helping the students to learn what liberal education is, you have to think about many things. You have to think about what we think about when we teach any other kind of class. How do students learn? Different students learn in different ways. What kind of activities do you have to engage in? You have to engage in different kinds of activities. But let me explain to you what the process is that I have in mind, what it is that I'm trying to get at, what it is that I think that we have to offer to students. So in our colleges, we have a traditional curriculum, and that's the disciplines. And as I said earlier, in some of those disciplines, it's possible that the idea of liberal education will come up. It's not likely to come up in mine, in economics. It's not likely to come up in sociology. It's not likely to come up in chemistry or psychology. It's not likely to come up in studio art. Most of those disciplines, it's not likely to come up. And so people aren't bad because they teach their disciplines. We hire them that way. We hire them in their discipline. We ask them to teach their discipline. But we need to ask them to help the students learn what liberal education is. We need to ask them, as they're helping the student to select their courses, as we're helping the student to navigate the curriculum, we need to, at the same time, be asking the students to do another set of activities and to bring what they're learning in that other set of activities into that advising relationship with us. So all of us at liberal arts colleges have a wealth of co-curricular activities that we offer our students. We have off-campus study. That could be abroad or it could be here in the United States. We have internship programs and externship programs. We have individual research with faculty members. Sometimes that's in the summer. Sometimes it's in a regular senior honors project. We have volunteer work in the community. We have service learning courses. We have a whole plethora of co-curricular activities. If you're trying to help a student learn, of course, one of the things you need to know about the student is how they learn. So you need to know the student. You have to take the time to find out what the student's background is, what the student's passions and interests are, what it is that motivates them to be in the world. I won't presume to define liberal education for you. I'm going to elide that question today a little bit, although I'm going to offer you a practical answer to the question. But I believe that all of you use the word transformative when you talk about liberal education. You believe that the education that you're offering transforms undergraduates. It makes them into people who are different than the people they would have been if they didn't get this education with you. And so in order to affect that transformation, you've got to find out what kind of person this is. What kind of background do they have? How does that background affect the risks they're willing to take? What kind of chances are they willing to take in an internship, in a volunteer opportunity, in a entrepreneurial activity with you? Do they have the background to even understand what it means to take those risks? What is it that they're interested in? Where would they like to be in the world when they leave Lawrence or Denison or Randolph? What is it that they hope to do in the world? Send them into those things. Ask them to become involved in those activities. And when they come back, ask them, what did you find out would have been most helpful for you in working in that area? What did you find out people studied that didn't help them at all? Now, of course, it helps if you tell them you're going to ask them these questions before you send them out to do the work. And in fact, in this model of advising, you are putting immense responsibility on the student. This is not you pouring things into a vessel. You don't open the student's head and pour the knowledge in. You don't tell them where they can get a job. You don't tell them what they should be interested in. You don't know. They have to build that. This is a part of higher learning to think in a higher order. It's higher order learning. And so you're giving them a skill which they will need for the rest of their life. And of course, the thing that they want to pursue now probably is not going to be the thing they're going to do all their life. We used to say you have 7 careers in your life. I think now it's 14 or 15 that you'll have in your life. So you're giving them a set of skills. I would argue, if I had more time, I would argue passionately, we don't need a different curriculum in our colleges. We offer what our students need to be able to engage the world where it is. I don't need to add more majors. Earlier, Jeff Salingo talked about how many majors have been invented. That's great, that's fine, it's good for some schools. Liberal arts colleges don't need to invent new majors. We don't need to invent new disciplines. I agree with Brian Pirtle, we need to teach people to dance between disciplines. If they're focused in one discipline, they're dancing with dogma. They're not dancing between disciplines. But send them into the world, bring them back, ask them questions about what they're finding out, and they will tell you what kind of places they should be plugging into the curriculum. Oftentimes I would get students at Grinnell when I was teaching full-time who wanted to go into environmental work. And so they come and they want to take every course in the political science curriculum. They want to take the course in the presidency, the course in Congress. They want to take every course because they're going to change the world by legislating the right things environmentally. So you send them out to get a job with the county land trust, and they come back and you ask them a couple of questions, and they found out that water table runoff is a big problem, and by gosh, you need to know chemistry and biology to be able to do this. Now, before they had the experience, you can't get them to voluntarily take a biology or chemistry class. Now they understand that's what they need to do. Or take the student who comes, the rare student we have who really wants to embrace the sciences. This usually comes with a sign across the forehead that says pre-med. And then they want to take chemistry, biology, biochemistry, and calculus the first semester. They don't want to touch anything else in the curriculum. But get them out working in a community health clinic after their first year. Get them involved in a public health project after their sophomore year. And they will begin to understand they better know how to speak more than one language. And that's if they're going to stay in the United States. I'm not even talking about if they want to work someplace else. You better know more than one language. You better know something about cultural differences between people. Probably a good idea to study some sociology and anthropology. And by the way, where are you going to learn about the barriers that we create for each other? You better study in the humanities as well. All right? So through those experiences, the student will begin to see what they need to do. Just as importantly, the student will begin to see what kind of life she's building for herself, what kind of ways she's preparing herself to enter the world. That is probably the most important work that we do. It's wonderful to have a general education package, but I've taught at a college that doesn't have any curricular requirements. It's wonderful not to have curricular requirements, but you still want the students to take that broad variety of courses. The question isn't whether we want students to have a broad exposure to human learning. The question is, why are we doing that? What kinds of power does it give them? How does it transform them to be different people in the world? And how can they learn to continue to have that kind of curiosity about the world? I don't have to tell you, if you're American, that we live in a highly anti-intellectual culture. Richard Hofstadter pointed this out 50 or 60 years ago in his famous book, Anti-Intellectualism in America. He said it waxes and it wanes. We happen to be at a moment, I think this is what Brian Pirtle was trying to say earlier, it's waxing right now. It's not waning. But that's all the better for us. We have important work to do. But that work isn't delimited by the 4 years that the students are on our campus. We prepare, we have the great gift in our lives as liberal educators to have those students for 4 years, to re-enter that culture and to take critical thinking, humane commitment to others, and active citizenship with them. They learn to be in the world as different people than they would have been if they didn't have this education. If that education's really going to matter for them, if they're really going to do with it what we hope they will do with it, then it is in that advising relationship that they can learn what liberal education is, and they can learn to be liberal learners for the rest of their lives. So what does advising have to do with it? Advising has everything to do with it. If we're going to be successful at the project that we have given ourselves, that's the work we have to do. Thank you very much.